In this video, I want to provide you with an update on changes to the Snowflake UI. Snowflake makes changes to its UI in order to accommodate new capabilities it is adding to the Snowflake product, and for this reason, a new Snowflake UI called Workspaces is being introduced. Starting September 2025, Snowflake began rolling out its new Workspaces UI, which will eventually replace the existing Snowsight UI. As you already know, Snowsight uses worksheets and worksheets are going away. Let's now talk about what you need to know about this transition. As I already mentioned, Workspaces will replace the existing Snowsight UI, which uses worksheets. The rollout is of course gradual, and during this transition, if you have an existing Snowflake account, you will still have the option to use Snowsight UI, and Snowflake will nudge you to use the new Workspaces UI. Eventually, Worksheets and Snowsight will be deprecated and you will have to use Workspaces. Now, all new accounts created on Snowflake starting September 2025 and later will see the new Workspaces UI, and there is no option to revert back to the old UI. Snowflake has not yet published a full deprecation timeline for Snowsight, but they will provide advance notice. For now, both UIs exist. I plan to gradually transition the course to the new UI. However, this will take some time as I have to re-record a lot of videos. If you're using Snowflake at work, it could be a couple of months before you start seeing the new UI depending on how pushy Snowflake is. In this video, I will help you understand why Workspaces UI is being introduced. Before I get into Workspaces UI, I want to show you how the very first Snowflake UI looked. This is how the very first Snowflake UI looked and was called the Classic Console. The Classic Console was replaced with Snowsight UI, and the reason Snowsight replaced the Classic Console was because the Classic Console did not support Python worksheets. So if I wanted to write a Python program to access data in Snowflake tables, it was not possible to do so from within the Classic Console. Additionally, Snowflake was working on launching Snowpark, which is mainly a Python-based product, and had to make updates to its console so that developers could use Snowpark from within its UI. For all these good reasons, Classic Console was deprecated and replaced with Snowsight UI. Snowsight UI supports Python worksheets or notebooks in addition to SQL worksheets, and you could now access your data in Snowflake tables with familiar Python code. That explains the change from Classic Console to Snowsight UI. So, the next obvious question would be, why change to Workspaces? The addition of Workspaces represents the evolution of Snowflake from a pure SQL database with support for SQL alone to a full-fledged IDE like Visual Studio or PyCharm, where it can hold files of different types such as Python files for Snowpark, SQL scripts, Markdown documentation, and artifacts like Streamlit app definitions, or even environment configuration files like the .env file which hold API keys, thus offering a consolidated development experience to the Snowflake developer. In an IDE like Visual Studio, you have a project folder, and inside that folder, you can have multiple different files and folders, which in turn can have subfolders. All the files of a project are stored inside one main folder. This exact structure is being recreated in Snowflake with Workspaces. The default workspace is called My Workspace is auto-created for you, and you can create multiple workspaces for your individual project needs. If you have worked with Snowsight in the past, you know one of its drawback was that while you could create folders, you could not nest a folder inside another. With Workspaces, this limitation has been permanently removed, allowing you to create a proper hierarchical project structure. Additionally, you can now upload files and folders and even create DBT projects directly inside Snowflake, none of which was possible with the legacy Snowsight UI and worksheets. Workspaces also introduces native Git integration. This means your code no longer needs to be saved in a proprietary Snowflake format. You can connect your workspace directly to external repositories like GitHub or GitLab, thus enabling seamless push and pull of code. By pulling code from GitHub, you create a new workspace directly inside your Snowflake profile, which makes adding existing GitHub repo code super easy. This enables teams to easily manage version control, collaborate, create branches, review pull requests, and deploy code using CI/CD ready workflows, all without ever leaving the Snowflake UI. Really amazing, isn't it? By centralizing everything into a single environment, Workspace dramatically reduces context switching. Developers can now open multiple files in split plane views, compare code and results side by side in real time, and leverage features like query history pane, which provide details of all the queries run, and AI augmented coding with Snowflake Copilot directly within their project files. With the advent of AI and Snowflake's desire to lead the market with its AI offerings, Snowflake workspaces are crucial to its AI push because they offer the modern centralized development environment that data scientists and data engineers need. I hope you now have a good understanding of as to why Snowflake is moving towards workspaces. This new integrated experience, which transforms the old UI into a full feature IDE, helps pave the way for significantly faster, integrated, sophisticated data development, thus improving developer productivity. I'm sure you will enjoy using workspaces once you fully learn how to use it. In this video, you will learn how to navigate and use the Workspaces UI in Snowflake to organize and manage your projects. When you finish signing up for your account, you will see this screen and can skip the loading data wizard. Now, from this default screen, you will need to click on Projects and then select Workspaces to begin. Once selected, the workspace environment will open. Next, you can hit Launch Tour button and it will give you some information about workspaces. As you can see here, support for Python notebooks and Streamlit apps are coming soon. This means that for now, you won't be able to add .py files to workspaces, but the feature will be available in a future update. It is possible that support may have been added by the time you are watching this video. For quicker navigation, a list of keyboard shortcuts are available from Snowflake. You can use these shortcuts if you are a keyboard warrior and like to use shortcuts. I'm using a Mac, so the shortcuts shown here apply to Mac OS. If you are on Windows, you will see a different set of shortcut keys. Please use the shortcuts that are applicable to you. Once the workspace environment is loaded, you will see two panes beside the navigation menu. The top one is the most important one and is called the Workspace pane, and the second one is called the Database Explorer. We will focus our attention on the Workspace pane, which is by far the most important pane we will learn in this video. When a new account is created, it automatically includes a default workspace called My Workspace, which is pre-created for you. As a developer, you can use this workspace if you want to. However, a better way to learn is to create a new workspace which can then be used to store your project files. I will go ahead and create a new workspace called Learn Workspaces. Learn Workspaces workspace has been successfully created. Now I named the new workspace Learn Workspaces. You are free to name it whatever you want. Now if you notice, I created the workspace name in lowercase. However, I want to change it to uppercase, and this can be done by clicking the three dots out here and using the rename option. The workspace has been renamed to uppercase. If you want to delete the workspace, one can use the delete option. If you do this, the workspace you created will be permanently deleted and you will lose all the files saved inside this workspace. At this time, because it is newly created, there are no files in this workspace. However, if you did, you will lose all of it and there is no way to recover it. So you need to be very careful before you decide to do something like that. Since I need this workspace to demo it for this video, I will not delete it, but I am sure you understand how to do it. Once you have a workspace created, you can create multiple files inside it, and this is done by clicking Add New. As you can see, you can create .sql files, Python files and notebooks, plain old text files, or even markdown files, which are basically regular files saved with the .md extension. I will choose SQL file and provide the name of the SQL file I want to add to the workspace. I will call it explore.sql. I will add a second file called temp.sql. You can see that the files are opening in the workspace editor as I am adding them. You can close these open files by hitting the X on the file, and you can double click the file to open it again. Next, I will add a text file called table naming standards.txt where I will store the naming standards for my table in Snowflake, like how long the table length must be and such. I will paste some table naming standards info into this file. The content that are pasted are auto-saved, so you don't need to manually save it. In fact, there is no option to manually save it. I can now refer to the table naming standards.txt file in my workspace when I am creating tables instead of going to table naming standards document, which is stored somewhere on my laptop or on the shared drive. You can already see how Workspaces is helping you organize your project files, thus avoiding you to have to leave Snowflake to find information, thus saving you time and effort. In addition to creating files, I can create folders too. I need to again use add new to create a folder. I will create a folder called database standards. Folders are created in Workspaces to group files that are logically related to each other. This is the same way as we would do it on our laptop where we club together similar files. In my case, I am creating a folder called database standards so that I can place all naming standards file inside this folder. Next, I will create a file called staging table naming standards.txt which I will create inside the database standards folder. I will paste the project's staging table naming standards into this file, and as expected it will be auto saved. So now I have a total of 4 files and a folder, with one file being inside the folder and 3 outside at the root level. Now if you noticed, the table naming standards.txt and the staging table naming standard.txt files are related to naming standards, and hence ideally both of them should be inside the database standards folder. Now if you want to move the table naming standards.txt, which is outside the folder, into the database standards folder, in that case I can drag and drop the file into the folder. The drag and drop is a success. Now I am not limited to dragging files into a folder. I can also remove files from a folder by dragging it out. So I can drag the table naming standard.txt out of the folder if I wanted to, or drag it back in whenever I need it. When dragging files, you can drag only one file at a time. And if you attempt to select two files at a time, it will not allow me to select more than one file. Only one file can be moved at a time, and if you need to move more than one file, in that case, you will need to drag and drop again. In the Learn Workspaces, I have just a single folder. However, if you have multiple folders in your workspace, in that case, I can drag files from one folder to another folder too. Let me show you how. I will create a new folder called temp folder inside my workspace. Temp folder is empty, and I will drag temp.sql to the temp folder. Next, I will drag temp.sql to the database standards folder. The move is a success, showing you that you can move files from one folder to another. With temp folder, I created two folders which are at the same level. However, can I create nested folders? Yes. Workspaces allow nested folders, so I can nest one folder inside another, which is what I will do. I will create a new folder called Snowflake Best Practices. And this folder is a subfolder of the database standard folder. If I collapse the database standard folder, the Snowflake best practices folder gets hidden as it is a child folder. The Snowflake best practices folder is as expected empty because I just created it and I can now add files inside this folder with the plus sign. I will go ahead and create a file called temp table naming standard.txt in the Snowflake best practices folder. Next, I will create a second file called performance-tune-sql.txt. Now that this file is created, I realize that the temp table naming standard.txt needs to be moved to the parent folder database standards, and I can drag and drop the same to the parent folder. The reason I am moving this is because temp table naming standards belongs to the database standards. The move is a success. In fact, you can drag and drop folders too. I'm going to drag the temp folder into the database standards, and this shows you that just like files can be dragged and dropped, folders can be dragged and dropped too. Next, I will demo how to duplicate, rename and delete a file. This remains the same irrespective of which folder the file is in. It could be nested or otherwise. Go to the file you want to duplicate and click the three dots. Here you have the option to duplicate, rename and delete. I will duplicate the file temp.sql and see that now you have a new file called tempcopy.sql, which is an exact duplicate. Next, I will go to this file and rename it to temp_delete.sql. The rename is complete, and finally, I will delete this file by running delete, which permanently deletes the file. The deleting cannot be undone, so as I told you previously, please be very careful before you delete files. Duplicating, renaming and deleting files are operations that are frequently done by the Snowflake data engineer like you and me, because we are always creating multiple versions of the same code, and hence I think this is a very useful feature which someone like you and me can take advantage of. Now, if for any reason you want to download one of your files in your workspace, you can use the download to download the file, and the file will be downloaded to your local machine or laptop. We just saw the duplication, renaming and deletion of files in a workspace. I now have a question for you. Just like files, can folders also be duplicated, renamed and deleted? What do you think? Let's find out. As you can see here, there is no option to duplicate a folder. However, what you can do is you can rename it or delete it if that is your project requirement. And as I've been telling you several times, if you delete the folder, it will be permanently deleted along with all its contents, and hence you need to be super careful before you do it. While files and folders can be created inside workspaces, you may sometimes need to upload files and folders directly from your local machine or laptop. This generally happens if you got some SQL or data files via email and need to upload it to your workspace. I will upload a folder with the upload folder option under add new. the folder sample employee data is uploaded, and I can see sample data inside the workspace. And instead of having to go to my local drive to look at the sample files, I can check them out here in the workspace, which will save me time when I'm coding my Snowflake scripts. You also have the option of uploading just a single file or files from your local drive instead of an entire folder. Let me do that. The upload is a success. So, depending on your use case, you can choose to either import a file or folder to make your life easy or create files manually. If you are working on a very large project, you will have a lot of files in your workspace. You can use the search functionality to try and locate the files. In our workspace, we have a few files and are able to see them visually. However, once you are over 20 files, trying to find them visually will be hard, and the search functionality begins to make a lot of sense. Another interesting action you can perform on the file is copy full path. Before I copy the full path on temp.sql, let me do that on a data file and paste it in the editor window. The fully qualified path to this data file allows it to be read from its location in Workspace by SnowSQL or accessed by Snowflake stored procedures for applying business logic and loading the data into the target table. SQL files also have a path attached to them. This path can be used to execute the SQL file on SnowSQL or SnowCLI, which are Snowflake command line tools, and even from a stored procedure. If you are thinking, what is so great and powerful about the ability to access data files and stored SQL scripts directly from the workspace environment, the biggest benefit is that you can now reference, read, or run these files from workspaces just like they are on your local machine, but they are actually not. This makes running scripts in production much easier, as you don't need to have a command line tool to run these scripts, and you get improved security and version control from Snowflake. In short, Workspaces makes executing external SQL scripts simple, seamless, and secure right within Snowflake.